My face had paled to a mask of cowardice when I saw my guide turn back. The sight of it the sooner brought the colour back to his. He stood apart like one who strains to hear what he cannot see, for the eye could not reach far across the vapours of that midnight air. "Yet surely we were meant to pass these tombs," he said aloud. "If not, so much was promised. Oh, how time hangs and drags till our aid comes." I saw too well how the words with which he ended covered his start, and even perhaps I drew a worse conclusion from that than he intended. "Tell me, master, does anyone ever come from the first ledge whose only punishment is hope cut off into this dreary bottom?" I put this question to him, still in fear of what his broken speech might mean, and he said, "Rarely do any of us enter here. Once before, it is true, I crossed through hell, conjured by cruel Erichtho, who recalled the spirits to their bodies. Her dark spell forced me, newly stripped of my mortal part, to enter through this gate and summon out a spirit from Judaica. Take heart. That is the last depth and the darkest lair, and the farthest from heaven which encircles all, and at that time I came back even from there. The marsh from which the stinking gases bubble lies all about this capital of sorrow, whose gates we may not pass now without trouble." All this and more he expounded, but the rest was lost on me, for suddenly my attention was drawn to the turret with the fiery crest, where all at once 3 hellish and inhuman furies sprang to view, blood-stained and wild. Their limbs and gestures hinted they were women. Belts of greenest hydras wound and wound about their waists, and snakes and horned serpents grew from their heads like matted hair and bound their horrid brows. My master, who well knew the handmaids of the Queen of Woe, cried, "Look, the terrible Erinyes of Hecate's crew. That is Megara to the left of the tower. Alecto is the one who raves on the right. Tisiphone stands between." And he said no more. With their palms they beat their brows. With their nails they clawed their bleeding breasts. And such mad wails broke from them that I drew close to the poet, overawed. And all together screamed, looking down at me, "Call Medusa, that we may change him to stone. Too lightly we let Theseus go free. Turn your back and keep your eyes shut tight, for should the Gorgon come and you look at her, never again would you return to the light." This was my guide's command, and he turned me about himself and would not trust my hands alone, but with his placed on mine, held my eyes shut. Men of sound intellect and probity, weigh with good understanding what lies hidden behind the veil of my strange allegory. Suddenly there broke on the dirty swell of the dark marsh a squall of terrible sound that sent a tremor through both shores of hell. A sound as if 2 continents of air, one frigid and one scorching, clashed head-on in a war of winds that stripped the forests bare, ripped off whole boughs and blew them helter-skelter along the range of dust it raised before it, making the beasts and shepherds run for shelter. The master freed my eyes. "Now turn," he said, "and fix your nerve of vision on the foam there where the smoke is thickest and most acrid. As frogs before the snake that hunts them down churn up their pond in flight until the last squats on the bottom as if turned to stone, so I saw more than 1,000 ruined souls scatter away from one who crossed dry-shod the Stygian marsh into hell's burning bowels." With his left hand he fanned away the dreary vapours of that sink as he approached, and only of that annoyance did he seem weary. Clearly he was a messenger from God's throne, and I turned to my guide, but he made a sign that I should keep my silence and bow down. Ah, what scorn breathed from that angel presence! He reached the gate of Dis, and with a wand he waved it open, for there was no resistance. "Outcasts of heaven, you twice loathsome crew," he cried upon that terrible sill of hell, "how does this insolence still live in you? Why do you set yourselves against that throne whose will none can deny, and which times past has added to your pain for each rebellion? Why do you butt against fate's ordinance? Your Cerberus, if you recall, still wears his throat and chin peeled for such arrogance." Then he turned back through the same filthy tide by which he had come. He did not speak to us, but went his way like one preoccupied by other presences than those before him, and we moved toward the city, fearing nothing after his holy words. Straight through the dim and open gate we entered unopposed, and I, eager to learn what new estate of hell those burning fortress walls enclosed, began to look about the very moment we were inside, and I saw on every hand a countryside of sorrow and new torment. As at Arles, where the Rhone sinks into stagnant marshes, as at Pola by the Quarnero Gulf, whose waters close Italy and wash her farthest reaches. The uneven tombs cover the even plain. Such fields I saw here spread in all directions, except that here the tombs were chests of pain. For in a ring around each tomb great fires raised every wall to a red heat. No smith works hotter iron in his forge. The biers stood with their lids upraised, and from their pits an anguished moaning rose on the dead air, from the desolation of tormented spirits. And I said, "Master, what shades are these who lie buried in these chests and fill the air with such a painful and unending cry?" "These are the arch-heretics of all cults, with all their followers," he replied. "Far more than you would think lies stuffed into these vaults. Like lies with like in every heresy, and the monuments are fired, some more, some less, to each depravity its own degree." He turned then, and I followed through that night, between the wall and the torments, bearing right.